So two parts. Well, first, on how we adapted to the COVID crisis itself, and particularly how we took on agile and distributed leadership, and what I called encouraging scavengers and renegades, and we'll come to what they are in a little bit. And then part two, looking at the lessons learned, the things we don't want to lose, the things we kind of discovered about ourselves that we do want to lose. Something that's come up again and again and again in all of the sessions today, formal versus informal as an organization. And something that the director of HR in the Irish Civil Service said to me recently, one of the great fears as organizations come out of COVID is that the corporate memory is so short sometimes, and there will be an attempt to reassert the structures and the thinking and the methods that were there before. And how we might think about ways of avoiding that. And also my great principle in life that all problems are generic until you apply your mind to them. And we'll have a look at how that works as we go along. So in the beginning, now, as I said, we were an institute that did deeply small group focused, very personal, intense development in leadership, in management, in organizational development, but very focused on rethinking the self in order to be part of a better, more sustainable organization. We had zero in the way of digital capacity. In fact, I would go so far as to say that a lot of my colleagues were anti-digital because of our history, because of the historical story that wraps around our organization. And we were very facilitator-centric and old school. We were recognizably a good old-fashioned education institute, and none of that worked for us on day one of lockdown. Absolutely none of it. We went from being successful, very niche in some ways, but successful, to zero revenue in 24 hours flat. Shocking thing. Now, if I tell you all these months later, we haven't made a single person redundant. And we've managed to bring the entire community through this process. In the process of doing that, we are a digital business. We opened up 6 weeks after the close down at the end of March with a digital offering. Technology is now central to our offering. Flexibility, to my mind, goes with technology. It gives you the opportunity to be more flexible, both for us and for our learners. And we've also found ways to do what we do. And I know some of you on this call are kind of aware of what we do and how we do it. We've kept the Roffey Park experience, the intense personal developmental experience, whilst adopting all of these new thoughts around technology, robotics, and all sorts of other things. So when lockdown 2 happened a couple of weeks ago, unlike in March, where we were all thinking this is doom, we were, this time around, we just shrugged our shoulders and said, okay, let's just crack on as we are. And as we are is a very different business from where we were. This was my message to staff in March 2020, and I wanted to share it with you, not to show that it's a great message necessarily, but to show the kind of things we had to put on the table for discussion. And as everybody from David onwards has talked about so far, you have to engage, you have to discuss, you have to communicate, you have to dialogue. I'm a forensic psychologist by profession and by training. Intercultural dialogue is actually my absolute specialization. So I ought to be able to do this thing quite well, but dialogue, like emotional intelligence, is actually a collaborative skill. It's not a personal skill. So the message was we have to respond to the world as it is, not the world we wish it to be. And many organizations faced that challenge in March. But on the other hand, as the chair of IBM said many, many years ago, you can change anything you like, but you can't change your values. If you do, they weren't your values. And we have to remain true to our values and to our charitable objects, which is to research and educate for the welfare of everyone at work, not just the powerful. And that meant for us a lot of work, a lot of discussion. We needed to redesign our offering, rethink our approaches, develop technologies we frankly didn't understand. And at the same time, we need to bend all of those things so that they stayed true to the way we want to work, to the intense, the dialogic, the shared collaborative learning approaches that we are famous for, because they were very largely perfected here in the 50s, 60s, and 70s before they became more common. So we wanted our history to survive the change. And my point was, therefore, there's absolutely no reason to feel down or devastated. Our jobs have just become really, really interesting. We have a real opportunity to change the way we think, change the way we do things, and come out stronger at the other end. And I have to say, I'm intensely proud of everyone in the organization. They have come together in ways that have been wonderful to participate in and be a colleague in. Now, here's a model from an OD perspective, and in Jane's planning model earlier on, OD is organizational design and development. It's very much part of what organizations are having to think about when they think about flexibility, because often structures of organization and measures of organization don't enable flexibility in any sense whatsoever. So if you look at the N in the center of the model, from strategy to structure to operations to skills, those are the kind of hard things that that OD helps various functions and various leaders in organizations to look at. What are we seeking to do? How do we go about organizing to do it? How does that act upon the marketplace and our clients or customers or students or patients? And what skills are required to make those things sustainable? But of course, there's the other Z that goes through the N, which is much softer. It's about our purpose. It's about our values. It's about how we do things efficiently and how we measure, not just to say, did the operations work, but also to say, are we thinking and embedding measures and purpose and values into the things we're doing on a day-by-day basis. And of course, like any organization, and we've seen this in all of the discussions so far today, we have regulatory compliance issues that we all face. Certainly, Dagmar does in Pfizer, and in the NHS for sure, and in higher education, absolutely. We all have ethics at the heart of what we do, and that's come out really strongly for me, listening to everybody. And there's the way our marketplaces respond. And culture has been mentioned a lot in all of the sessions. Culture is constantly forming; it's never static, and we had to consider how historical culture and future culture came together without disconnecting from each other. And so we needed to talk together about what standards are we going to expect, and indeed what behaviors do we want to underpin those standards in order to get us through this period of emergency, but in order to build the organization we wanted to see. So we adopted Agile. Now, Agile at a very simple level. None of us are Agile geeks, and I say that with all due respect to people who genuinely understand Agile. But really what we wanted to get to was some very basic principles, that we needed to re-engineer ourselves quickly in order to be able to respond to what we were going through, but also what our clients and students and delegates were going through. So we split the organization into some very simple Agile working groups. Each one had a program of work, an Agile team, a Scrum Master who was effectively leading those Agile teams. And we had a twice daily process of checking in, checking out, and a once a week process of a sprint, which is a condensed amount of work to achieve a set group of objectives. Now, it would be very easy then to imagine that people would become so focused on their work that they would become less flexible and not more. And what we immediately had to address was, although we wanted people in at the touch points at the beginning, at the end of the day, everything else had to be then mediated, discussed, and agreed in order that a lot of our people had children or indeed grandchildren they were looking after. Many of them are carers because of the age of our workforce. They often have older relatives that they need to care for. So we really needed to think very hard about how, whilst needing to change at speed, we also needed to adapt to suit the circumstances that we were in. And I love the point about permission. And I'll tell you a story about permission. I got about 2 months into the Agile process, and I think I spoke to Joe about this the last time we met. And I went from working a typical 8-9 hour day to working about 15 hours a day because life was just one long Zoom call. And I wasn't giving myself permission to think, you know what, I need to go for a walk. I need to stop this. I need to go for a run. In fact, I didn't go for a run for 2 months. And it was one of my colleagues who phoned me up and said, you realize everybody's overworking because you're overworking. And that was such a slap really to me and a lesson to me that modeling behavior is not just about modeling the achievement of things and the doing of things and the, you know, how hard can you grind yourself down. Modeling is also about modeling life to your colleagues as well. And there's more to life than we often recognize in the workplace. And certainly more to life than we accommodate by the measures that we use, particularly performance management measures. One of the things we've learned is that performance management measures, as they are generally done, that are very individualized, very what did you do kind of discussion, are absolutely the antithesis of flexibility, of collaboration, of dialogue, of creativity, and all the things that we talk about promoting, but we then don't measure when it comes to performance. So I had to be told by my people, back up and take time out and get lost and take a holiday for a day. And I owe them that, actually, because it was getting to be very hard and very unhealthy. So a lesson for all, and I talk to a lot of CEOs and a lot of C-suite people, and I say, look, do yourself a favor, model the things that your HR, your OD people are talking about in a good way, not in a bad way. We don't have to be the person able to do the most for the longest. Now, the Agile environment, therefore, we wanted to stay true to our way of working and our way of educating. And that involves 3 things. All things are adaptive, and therefore all things can be changed. All things are worked at collaboratively, and therefore we need to retain dialogue and debate as part of what we do. And out of those 2 things comes leadership. Leadership can be generated from wherever. And we wanted people to know that, to accept that and take that on board. That although, yes, we have a purpose and a guiding set of principles and indeed a strategy, that leadership could be generated out of all of these groups. And that's leadership of self, leadership of each other, very open, very honest, and very transparent feedback continuously. And the results were wonderful. But that process of the stakeholders in the background, we have a trustee board like all charities who want to know, is everything okay? We have a lot of working environment where nothing was okay in the last 6 or 7 months. And we needed teams to feel that they could take their own leadership of those things as they went along. And they did fantastically well. We started to look at how we could learn in an agile way. I'll be honest with you, with a workforce that's been in place 18, 20 years on average, and other people have mentioned you get less flexible as you get older. Actually, I have to say to you, speaking as a forensic psychologist, there's no evidence for that whatsoever. Older workers are often not given the chance to be flexible and different. It's not that they can't take it, it's often that they're not given it. So I would encourage you to rethink that. There is no evidence that age and flexibility makes you less intelligent or less adaptable. Habit does, for sure, but you can change habits. So we wanted to encourage not just agile action, we wanted to encourage agile learning. So every team, and this goes to the pact and also to the constant dialogic process that everybody's been describing, discussed its goals, set its high-level activities, did its check-in progress, what are we doing, how are we doing it, understood how and when to close things out, but then at the same time encouraged reflection, encouraged problem solving, and rapid learned sharing and feedback in order that the team goals could be constantly revisited. Are what we're doing, or is what we're doing, fit for purpose in the way that we want to do it? And if not, how do we generate change? And any team member was able to generate change at any single time. So we tried to use distance as a way of encouraging collaboration, strangely enough. As we all went home, uh, we used the concept of collaboration and rhythm and participation as ways of encouraging a sense of collective self rather than me on my own in the spare room or the ironing board or wherever we are. And again, it worked. It worked really, really well. An interesting thing, going back to the feedback about whether people wanted to come back to work or not, 3 or 4 months in, and we have a lovely campus, which helps. And some of you I know have been here, and 3 or 4 months in, I was still getting people in tears on the phone saying, when can I come back to work? I miss the place. I miss the ability to walk around the grounds. And that did prompt the question, well, why do you think you can't? The grounds are open air. Do what you like with it. And the forest behind us, as some of you will know, is publicly open. And a lot of people were missing the sense of community, and they were fearful. They were deeply fearful that either the organization itself somehow would disintegrate, or it would cease to function, it would cease to have shape and structure, and then they would lose their jobs, and then it would be redundant, and then, yuck, everything would be really bad. We had to work hard to force, and I say the word in a positive way, force the connectivity points, come together. But then we had to provide the communication and the vulnerability to say to them, look, you can tell me when it's too tough, because I'm about to tell you I'm having a bad day. And coming from me and coming from everyone, that helped us regenerate sense of community. And that was very, very valuable indeed. So what did we learn? We learned at a meta level that a change process, and I only arrived here 2.5 years ago with the brief to re-energize, reshape, and redesign Roffey Park. And it was going slowly because of all the historical and deeply, deeply felt sense of identity and belonging that was part of the culture. And I was thinking to myself not very long ago, this is going to be a multi-year process to achieve what we need to achieve. We've done in 6 months more change than I thought we were capable of in the next 5 years. And so we learned that actually often what stands in the way of change is not ability, it's not know-how, it's emotional capacity. And emotional capacity is developed and generated through interconnection. And that was something I think is powerful, given what we teach, which is all about emotional capacity as leaders, as managers, in the way organizations can be designed. It was strange that we had to learn it the hard way ourselves, but learn it we did. At a micro level, we realized that, yes, we might all be in our 50s. In fact, I hit 60 last Friday, but we're capable of so many brilliant things. We're capable of taking on technologies we've never heard of, and they're now normal. We're capable of doing intensely dialogic and collaborative learning online in globally dispersed groups, and they love it. All the things we would have considered just balmy if somebody had said to us 6 months ago, you're going to be doing this by the end of the year. So we learned a lot for ourselves. We also learned to live our own learning model. This is the way we talk to our students and clients and delegates. That learning is about a pulse, plotting where you are and where you want to go, unlocking things so you can see them differently and feel them differently and think them differently. How we see, think, and feel, and how we intertwine those three things is a highly collaborative process. It's pointless saying to somebody, think about things by yourself. It just doesn't work in thinking or feeling terms. How do we leverage that stuff so we can help each other? The definition of success for us in all of our Agile groups now is how have we enabled the people around us? And that, I think, is a really nice definition of success. And our performance management has been redesigned as we've gone along to encourage exactly that kind of discussion on a quarter-by-quarter basis. When we look into the future, in terms of enabling that learning. What does it mean? How will we embed it? And then round the circle it goes again. So we've learned that actually our own model really does work in practice when we're doing it for ourselves, when we're doing it for others, and when we're doing it for our organization. Come to Scavengers and Renegades. One of the interesting things, and it's been mentioned, this formal to informal switch. We were a very formal, very bureaucratic, good old-fashioned management school. We're now incredibly organic. We're an ecosystem, I think, more than we're anything else. And what happened was people who were maybe at the periphery before the crisis moved to the center, people who were better able to think radically, change radically, propose things, and pull other people along with them. People who in normal times in an organization are often kept at a kind of a distance because in normal times, an organization wants a reasonable degree of certainty. What we needed was people who could deal with utter uncertainty. So one of the things you should look at is who moved to the center in your organization during the crisis, who spoke up and generated energy for themselves and from other people. Where were they before and why did they have that freedom to move? And how will you enable them post-crisis? We are an organization that sits in three countries on 2 continents. A lot of our informal leadership came from our smaller subsidiary businesses rather than from the central charity in the UK. And that wasn't the case before the crisis. So the informal organization became the thing that drove the change in the formal organization. On the other hand, some people moved from the center to the periphery. They couldn't deal with the uncertainties and they couldn't generate and they couldn't connect people together. And they weren't able to step out of the certainties and the anchored life that they were living to reuse some of what Jessica was talking about, to turn into connectors. And now they need to be helped and need to be developed and need to be brought back into the organization. And we've worked hard to do that. But post-crisis, we need to manage that part as well. So even as we come out of the process that we've been in, we'll need to think about what does our real new organization look like, the informal one that's built itself up during this process, and how do we blend that into a new dynamic and organic structure. And that brought us to the question, pre-lockdown, our organization focused on structure. We educated and we had to deliver programs and qualify students and evidence learning. It now lies in the action. It lies in generation of things. And it lies in intergeneration between teams and between functions and between locations and countries. Structure, when you are in a period of intense crisis, is far less important than generative action and the ability to adapt quickly within that generative action. The big thing, which we learned, and in a way we all know, if you look at models of competence, they often make fundamental mistakes. The big thing for us was that competence is interdependent. It has to be we together. There are hardly any, even in highly technical environments. And I've done a lot of work with civil engineering and other firms, and indeed French engineering firms, around the why career structure of the technical versus the person or the people management structure of career development. And often the mistake that's made is a sense that competence is an individual thing. There is hardly a competence that exists that is independent of other people and doesn't require other people for it to be achieved in practice. And we've learned that. We've learned that as you disperse and become a more flexible and more organic organization, you have to encourage interdependence of competence. What doesn't matter so much is who's got the functional ability to do something. What matters is how can we work well together, develop our judgment as we're doing so, and collaborate and build our competence as we're doing so. So moving from that low level to high level of competence, moving from being functionally able to do something to being able to generate judgment, leadership, and activity together was the big step change that we achieved in the way we think. We now have people who work across functions, who work across different parts of the business that months ago would never have thought it possible that they could do what they're currently doing. And it's not because they've become functionally better at doing something else, it's because they've been helped to become interdependently functional by other people. Now, we do a lot of work on resilience. In fact, a lot of the early work on organizational resilience in the UK started at Roffey Park, and way back in the 1940s as we were coming out of the war. And there are various things that contribute to team resilience. How we learn, how we build relationships, how we develop purpose and process. Those things are key to resilience. Resilience is not a personal thing. One of the most coercive things I think any manager or leader can say to an individual is, you lack resilience. Resilience is a socially generated thing. Other people give you resilience as much as you give them resilience. So the manager's role in facilitating resilience enables teams to persist despite challenges, enables teams and therefore individuals to continuously learn and improve and therefore sustain their performance. And those three things together are the outputs of resilience, and managers facilitating and leaders facilitating a learning orientation, a constant dialogue and relationship building, but a strong sense of purpose and team process is absolutely key to team resilience and performance. So I'm going to give you three takeaways. Search for your renegades, because in a period of high ambiguity, high change, you need to find them, nurture them, give them space, because they learn in action, and they can generate change not just by themselves, but often through and with other people. Adaptation is very, very key, and I'm not the first person to say this today. I think from David onwards, everybody said this. Be agile, fail quickly, let people fail quickly, encourage them. You say, well, if that didn't work, that didn't work. Chuck it, let's try something else. Remove the judgment. Success for me is not about did it work, it's about are we learning? And if we keep moving, keep learning, and allow these teams, these agile teams, to generate their own leadership, what they've been able to achieve has been fabulous as a result. But also collectivity. There's a lot of research emerging now about social isolation and social degeneration, both in children. If you've read the Ofsted report this week, which is showing that young primary school children are degenerating socially backwards, but also in older people, in care homes in particular, where the lack of social content is actually degenerating their illness at a faster rate. It's also starting to show up in workplaces or among work people. So we have to work hard on the collective, talking together, collaborating together, building mechanisms of support, and building open, positive, direct ways of offering each other feedback, guidance, and help and steer. These are the big, big three things which for us have generated a Roffey Park which is now less bureaucratic, less Horsham-centric, and much more international and outward-looking, but also where everybody feels they have a stake and a say in the way the future is likely to pan out. And that's where we are.